under the Blossom Ridge portion of the minutes.
I respectfully concede your point, Mr. Chairman, but I'm saying this is not a Blossoms Ridge issue. This is an issue of confusion of the law from your consultant to anything you do, not just the one before the matter today. My concern is more global,
Gotcha.
that your consultant is giving you confusing advice or confusing written advice in 3 letters, the 6th of June or July, the 1st of December, and the 28th of September. Clearly, and I've given Mr. Creech 10 copies of this document that I've just read to you. I have quoted from the law 2 paragraphs, 270400, paragraphs 2A and B on page 27-9, that clearly say, sir, gentlemen, esteemed commissioners, that you, as a body, as a township, we review a PPRO not based on the underlying zoning requested by the applicants, any of them, but by the existing zoning of that plot of land. If it's clearly, the project should be an enhancement. I'll read the 2 sentences of the law. 2A, approval of an application shall accomplish an integration of the proposed land development project with the characteristics of the project area, the township master plan, and result in an enhancement of the project area as compared to the existing current zoning. All I'm saying is, when you're, as a body, looking at anything, you should not be getting conflicting information from the consultants that are consulting you as a body. And that's what concerns me. And this is not a Blossom Ridge agenda item. It's a global item for your consideration.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Nix, he was referencing your letters. Would you care to opine in response?
In the PRRO district, being this is the first time I've seen this, and thank you for identifying who submitted it, because it's submitted unsigned and undated. This esteemed members of the Planning Commission document that I just received this evening. There are actually 2 standards in the zoning code under the PRRO that we have to deal with. And one deals with the proposed rezoning and what impact that would have, and also the existing zoning on the property. And I think we've made it clear in our writings over time and have distinguished in our writings how we've referenced both of those. I'm sorry if there's been any confusion. This is the first time I've heard of any such type of confusion done by the Planning Commission over the past decades that I've served the body. But if I have confused anyone, I apologize. But within this PRRO district, it is confusing, and I've tried my best to keep it as clear as possible. But there are 2 standards within the ordinance, Mr. Chairman.
May I respond to Mr. Nixon very briefly? Yes, there are 2 standards. We conclude that. One standard is the right to bring before your body a proposal for your consideration. That's the standard in Section C. The ability to bring a proposal. The standard to approve a proposal, to recommend it to the township, is the standard that you need to review. In Mr. Nix's letter on page 4 in July 27th, he says, the developer shall provide an enhancement to the area as compared to what would be permitted under current zoning, and such enhancement would not be assured in the absence of PRRO. Here, Mr. Nix is correct. He's correct criteria for approval. In the 2 other letters, nowhere does he say that. He says instead, on page 4, on September 28th, furthermore, the Planning Commission should also consider the ordinance and its more strict and limiting clause related to the proposed PRO. Site-specific conditions must be offered that are more strict and limiting than is otherwise permitted in the proposed underlying RM district, which is only for application, not for approval. On December 1st, he says the same thing again. The applicant has submitted a MRD test plan dated June 6th, presumably to determine the density normally permitted in the district. Subsection C2
requires that the proposed conditions be more strict and limiting than those proposed in the proposed district, not the current district. Although his words are absolutely true, they are misleading, because that's the letter where he recommends what he tells you he thinks you should do, and is recommending based on a erroneous part of the law. That's what is my bringing to your attention. Irregardless of anything before you, esteemed gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, you should have a clear understanding of the law and get clear and concise information from the consultants that we pay in this township. Thank you.
Thank you. My fellow commissioners, until tonight, was anybody confused by the letters received from Mr. Nix throughout this proposal?
Not at all, and I'd like to further add that I've been on this planning commission and board for 20 years, and believe me, I understand the ordinances, I understand the law, I understand the Open Meetings Act, and none of that has been violated. That's your interpretation.
Was anybody else confused prior to tonight?
No, I'm not confused at all. As Commissioner Edwards, I've been on here for 20 years, and I feel that Mr. Nix has always been open-minded and explained things to us, and then we on our own also do our homework so that we're aware of what the situation is.
I concur. No confusion on the presentation and review of Mr. Nix.
Jenny?
I was just going to say, this is a complicated case, and we have asked for clarification from time to time. Larry has provided that. In my instance, I've had to reread a number of things, but that's for my clarifications and to keep records straight. I think all the information has been provided to us, and it's up to me to constantly reread it to make sure I've got the right information at the forefront and understand this. I don't mind comments like this because many people who see the meetings, I don't have the benefit or do have the benefit of the information and all that we have here, also read this and may have a different interpretation and some complication. It is a complicated situation, but it has been repeatedly at every meeting been described to us. And I know Mr. Nix would again clarify if we ever asked.
And it's been correctly stated here that there are two standards. One has to do with the eligibility and the other with the recommendation for approval. And I find that Mr. Nix's comments have always been consistent, and perhaps Mr. Cerna in thinking that when Mr. Nix offers to us an opinion about what he thinks we may do, he can offer an opinion on both whether the project is eligible and whether it can be approved. And I found that his statements in that regard were perfectly consistent. He said you need to find that it's eligible under the strict and limiting clause, and you need to find that it's approvable under the enhancement clause. Perfectly clear.
Thank you. Since this was positioned as if it was not related to Blossom Ridge, hence why it's on this portion of the agenda, I will address that in general and say that, as others have said, that Mr. Nix provides input to us. He is one form of input. He's input that we consider as we go along through a process. His letters may be very specific to the stage of the process that we are at the time of his letter, but realizing that these proposals are long-term projects for us on the Planning Commission, it would be unreasonable to expect Mr. Nix to provide in one letter at the beginning of the process, or let's say in July, when we accept it for study, I believe in June. July is close to the beginning. I would expect that that it would be unreasonable and inappropriate for us to get an entire opinion about the entire project at that time. The project has changed. What's being proposed by the applicant, I know we're not talking about Blossom Ridge, but it seems like we are. What was being proposed by the applicant has changed over time. I would expect that the focus of our consideration, our discussions, would have changed over time. The focus of the public input has changed over time. What we heard from the public at the public hearing, the formal one, if you will, It's different than what we've heard along the way. Why? Because the product has changed, and people have been able to digest it, and they have modified their position in accordance to that. It's natural, it would be expected. I would ask you, Mr. Cerna, has your position on this project not evolved and changed over the 7 months since we first saw it?
Mr. Chairman, esteemed committee, no, my position hasn't changed, but my knowledge level of the law, my knowledge level of the process, the 1,000 hours I've spent reading the statutes, the laws, trying to understand what it is to be a resident of Oakland Township, what it is to have strong feelings about something and not really understand completely why. I'm a mechanical engineer, not a lawyer. I've had to study the law in the sense that I have to understand what you, in a very complex project, are going through. I humbly understand just how complex this is. The more I've studied, I told Mr. Creech today, or yesterday when I stopped in, that this is so complex. Your job in some ways is terribly difficult. Understanding that, and understanding that over the 20 years that some of you have been on this committee, there have probably only been 1 or 2 or 3 issues that come before you that are this complex or have this much intensity in them. So this is such a new thing that you're dealing with. This is such a new concept of putting a unique development into our township based on a concept in our master plan, that this is probably the most complex thing that any of you have done in 20 years, I would think. Again, I haven't studied that much. I see you shaking your head, but you know more than I do.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else with anything that's not on tonight's agenda? Yes, Joan.
My name is Joan Fogler, and I am the supervisor of Oakland Township. I have been in the township for 54 years. My family has been in the township since 1921. But I would just like to thank, on behalf of the board, the Planning Commission for the outstanding job you do for Oakland Township. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else, something not on tonight's agenda? Okay, moving on, we did change the order of things, and so we're going to go to the Lost Lake Nature Park Development. I think, is there somebody here from? Oh, there we are.
Larry, did you want to start out by saying something, or do you want us to start with the presentation?
Go ahead. What I would like is if you would start with a brief introduction for the public. We've all seen what's in the packet, but and then certainly I'd like Mr. Nix to jump in there. So briefly, please.
My name is Mindy Milos-Dale, and I'm the Parks and Trails Planner for Oakland Township. I'm here tonight with Pam Blau, who is our landscape architect for this project at Lost Lake Nature Park, as well as Colleen Barkham, who is one of our Parks and Recreation Commissioners here in Oakland Township. And I wanted to start off by just giving a little background on the project for people that may not be familiar with this park and these proposed improvements. Lost Lake Nature Park, first of all, in case you haven't been there, is located off Predmore Road, east of Lake George and west of Rochester Road. We purchased this park, which the part I'm talking about tonight is about 32 acres, back in 2004, using a combination of a state grant and our township's land preservation millage funds. The park was purchased to preserve and protect significant natural areas, including a lake, wetlands, and oak pine forest, as well as to provide passive recreation opportunities, including nature observation and interpretation, winter sledding, fishing, and boating. Existing structures that were there when we purchased the park included a residence, several barns, and a warming hut for the sledding hill. When we purchased